Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning back in. So the Mojave Desert regions of Southern California are one of my favorite places to explore. And as I've discussed with the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works facility at Hellendale, this area has a long history with Black Project aircraft development. Aside from Skunk Works, many other defense contractors have R&D facilities here in the Antelope Valley. Some are located on base at Palmdale's Plant 42 facility, while others are more discreet, sort of tucked away in remote corners of the desert that see few, if any, visitors. After my Hellendale explorations, I had a few viewers who live in the area reach out to me via DMs, suggesting I check out a strange airfield located up in the hills on the far western edge of the valley. The funny thing is, this facility has actually been on my radar as a place worth exploring for almost a year now. Some of the maps list this place as White Oak Airfield, but it's most commonly known as the Tejon Ranch RCS facility, operated or formerly operated by Northrop Grumman. Being an R&D facility of similar scope to Skunk Works' Hellendale site, it was originally built during the Cold War and has had many notable projects pass through it for testing, including the iconic B-2 stealth bomber and potentially other more secret aircraft that to this day remain classified. According to Northrop Grumman, radar cross-section testing here at Tejon officially stopped in 2011, with the reason given being the abundance of wind and solar farms that have sprung up across the area, causing interference with the testing process. The thing that has long intrigued me about Tejon are some of the bizarre stories that surround this place when it was operational. Researching this place led me to finding countless what I would consider reputable accounts from nearby residents of strange glowing orbs flying in the night sky above and around Tejon. Witnesses report lights dancing up and down, making maneuvers inconsistent with conventional aircraft, etc. I even heard one story relayed to me secondhand of something setting the ground on fire out here in the desert with what sounded to me like it could be some kind of directed energy weapons technology. UFO investigator Richard Boylan documented a sighting on April 5th of 1992. Boylan reported observing 4 glowing orbs about 50 feet in diameter, performing aerial maneuvers. When the aircraft landed, they de-energized and appeared as silver objects with backlit windows. Pretty crazy. There are accounts from employees at JPL, or Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who on occasion visited this site. They reported seeing similar orbs making maneuvers, and still other individuals reported seeing extremely bright, football-shaped aircraft coming out of the facility in the middle of the night. This definitely has my interest piqued. All in all, there are too many credible reports of anomalous activity at Tejon for me to easily dismiss them, which made me all the more eager to explore this area. Given that RCS testing stopped in 2011, I was really curious as to what the status of the facility was. Was it totally abandoned? Did Northrop still own it? Or did they operate there still in some capacity at all? As I was researching, I came across something that I thought was pretty awesome, and that's this footage here from a local drone pilot. Check it out. As you can see here, the facility looks to be completely abandoned. There's weeds growing up through the pavement and the buildings are starting to kind of fall into disrepair. One interesting thing I noticed in this footage was the white triangular object visible here for just a second, looking to be fairly large in my opinion, laying on the ground in the grass, just kind of left there abandoned. This was one thing that I really wanted to investigate to see if I could get a closer look as to what this thing was. I decided to hit him up on Instagram as I was heading out to Antelope Valley to see if he wanted to do some on-the-ground exploring of the facility. He told me that he developed sort of a similar fascination with it as I had ever since he shot his drone footage, and he was eager to do more exploring of the place himself. Now this may come as a little bit of a shock, but I hate being spied on, especially in digital spaces. That's why I was super excited to have Surfshark VPN sponsor today's expedition. I may have ended up on 1 or 2 government watch lists, but I can at least make it a little bit harder to snoop on my private data by browsing the internet using a VPN. When you connect to the internet, particularly when you're traveling and connecting to public Wi-Fi networks, your private information and data is exposed for the world to see, and bad actors can easily take advantage of this. When you connect with a VPN, it encrypts and anonymizes your traffic to protect you when you're using these public Wi-Fi networks. Connecting using a VPN also protects your location and your download history, which is a big reason why I personally never go without it. if you're trying to send and receive sensitive files, you can do so safely. One thing that really sets Surfshark apart from other competitors is their Surfshark One service. This includes an ad-free private search engine, a powerful antivirus software, and an alert service that warns you if things like your credit card, your ID info, or other private information are leaked online. If you're ready to take charge of your online privacy like I do, join Surfshark today. Go to surfshark.com/uncanny or use Uncanny at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. All right, so I stayed the night on a random patch of dirt just outside Lancaster last night. This morning I met up with Jesse. He's the guy behind the drone video that I watched to this place. His channel is called Summit Wizard FPV. So we're going to be doing some exploring around Tejon Ranch, seeing if we can get it all close to this place. Interestingly enough, I did a little bit of digging on the way down here, and it turns out that Northrop Grumman no longer owns the property. Now, I don't know if they operate here in any capacity, but the actual ownership is now under an LLC. And I wasn't able yet to trace the ownership of that LLC, so I'm going to keep digging on that. But I really don't know what we're going to find, if there's any kind of operations going on here at all. Like I said, from the drone video, it really doesn't look like it. It looks super abandoned. Interestingly enough, I don't think it's totally abandoned in the sense that there's still some sort of security presence. I was talking to Jesse before we started our drive up here, and it turns out a buddy of his drove his car right up to the front gate earlier this year, and somebody actually yelled at him over an intercom, basically telling him to get back. So there is some kind of security presence monitoring the facility. I don't know if it's on-site or if it's off-site. I kind of think it's probably monitored from off-site, judging by the state of disrepair that a lot of these buildings are falling into. But it is one thing that's going to be interesting to note. So because of that, we're not just going to be driving right up to the front gate, because I don't think that's going to be a good way to get close to the facility, given that apparently there is some kind of monitoring going on. We're actually going to head up sort of towards the eastern flank along the fence line here. There's a little patch of public land, and that's where we're going to be starting our expedition from. So we've just reached our stopping point. We're going to park our cars here in this little grove of juniper trees, and I'm going to get changed into something that's a little more earth tone so I don't stick out like a sore thumb. And then we're going to go ahead and do some scouting with the drone and see if there's been any changes to the facility, if it looks like there's been any activity out there in the last few months. So we'll see what we find.
Let me change models. This is pretty quick. No wind. Last time I was here, it was probably close to 40-mile-an-hour winds.
Okay.
I sped that footage up like 4 times, and it was just, I was barely crawling along going, come on, battery, you can do it, all the way out. So
yeah, today's like perfect right now.
yeah.
With the drone back on the ground and confident that there was nobody out there, we set off on foot towards the cluster of hangars and other buildings looming on the horizon. Yeah. The hike in would end up being a couple of miles through brush and dry washes, which provided some cover. Along the way, I couldn't help but think of what may have once sat in those hangars. The reports of brightly glowing orbs that I read were fresh in my mind. Additionally, one of my favorite Black Project aircraft, allegedly tied to Northrop, is the TR-3A Black Manta. According to reports from publications such as Popular Mechanics, this aircraft was flying missions alongside F-117s all the way back in the first Gulf War. Yet to this day, if it even exists, it still has never been declassified. Might this elusive, highly secret aircraft have once been at the facility we were heading to? After cresting the last small hill that was between us and the buildings, they began to come into clearer view. We were getting pretty close to the test area now. At this point, I was keeping an eye out for that white triangular object, as well as any potential security vehicles that might be approaching. It was around this time that I lost cell service as well, meaning I could no longer monitor my ADSB app to look for approaching aircraft.
Not like the camo dude.
Yeah,
Right.
not quite.
Tejon Ranch. They run by their own rules also.
Well, yeah, and then whoever these guys contract is probably different. The RCS test area lay directly ahead. Unlike the Skunk Works Hellendale site, this facility was not constructed with the retractable pylon that raised and lowered, so they would have put the pylon up manually, presumably. So we should be almost right on top of that object that we saw from the drone footage. Let's keep an eye out for it up here. It's right at the end of one of these runways. Yeah.
And this has been laying here a long time.
Yeah. Wow. Sure has. The triangular object with a fiberglass exterior appeared to be a scale model used for RCS testing. Presumably Northrop Grumman abandoned it here however many years ago when they no longer had any use for it. As we were poking around this triangle, we noticed a second object a little bit further south, so we made our way over to that one. Whether this object was a different test article or the other half of the first triangle, I wasn't sure, but the underside of it was composed of this honeycomb material common in aerospace engineering. Upon closer examination, this definitely seemed to be the other half of the first object. The fiberglass piece that we saw first was probably glued to this honeycomb piece, as evidenced by the adhesive around the edges. This definitely seemed to be an aerospace model used for testing or calibration purposes. It somewhat satisfied my curiosity. I'm glad I got to at least get a close-up look at it. It's curious to me that if Northrop sold this facility, or at least doesn't operate here anymore, it's interesting they would have left something like this behind. It must not have any, or at least much, monetary value. Otherwise, you would think they would have taken it. But anyways, let's head on up towards the runways that are just directly ahead of us up here. So coming up ahead of us here is the area where they would have mounted the RCS poles with the models on top, or airframes, for testing. I've seen this area on the satellite view when I've been researching this place, and it was also pretty evident on the drone footage too. Let's see if we can take a closer look. And again, this doesn't have the massive 200-foot deep chamber that Hellendale has. But it looks like we have some kind of a pit here, which is interesting. Let's see what we have here. Wow, so it almost looks like it would have gone deeper and there's some kind of a cover bolted down over the hole, because it kind of looks like that ladder would keep going if it weren't for whatever's blocking it there. This looks a bit more like what I would expect the spot where the pole would mount to look like. I'm assuming the base of the pylon would go right in this socket here. And over here we have some electrical equipment. So as we moved to the north end of the runways, we were starting to get pretty close to the cluster of buildings which were behind a second fence line. Admittedly, at this point, I was starting to get a little bit paranoid, which is kind of rare for me doing explorations. This was mainly just because I really didn't know the status of this facility, and I was half expecting black helicopters to come out of nowhere and intercept us before we got there. I pulled out my telephoto lens to get a little bit closer look before we made our way any closer. On the sides of the buildings were what looked like relatively new security cameras, at least new compared to the status of the buildings, which also made me a little bit nervous. I decided to do a little bit more drone scouting. While my drone was up in the air, I thought I could hear a helicopter not too far away, which definitely increased my paranoia. I quickly called the drone back, and Jesse thought he might have heard the sound of a 4-stroke engine driving up the wash towards us. So needless to say, my paranoia was definitely pretty high. I decided to bail, and we got out of there pretty quickly. Now in hindsight, may have been a little bit too premature, but I will say this. There will be a part 2 to this exploration where we do explore the buildings one way or the other, and I'll get into more of that later. But on this trip, my next stop was pretty interesting as well. I didn't want to get arrested too early into this trip because I had more on my itinerary. Next stop, I wanted to check out another Northrop Grumman product. This one, a little bit less secretive. It's the B-21 Raider. 2 of them had been transferred to Edwards Air Force Base recently, so I wanted to try and get a view of Edwards Air Force Base from a nearby hill to see if I could see this legendary B-21 Raider for myself. The military-controlled land surrounding Edwards Air Force Base is absolutely massive. Luckily, there's some hills down here to the southeast that are public land. They are about 8 or 9 miles from the runways though, so I do have to get my super zoom camera out. I will be cutting through quite a bit of atmospheric haze and distortion, but hopefully, given the right weather conditions, I'll be able to get a clear shot. Despite not having driven that far from Palmdale, I realized pretty quickly that I was in the middle of nowhere. The only signs of civilization that I saw were some trailers that were probably meth labs and some definitely illegal weed grows. In spite of this, I committed to spend the night out here. It would at least increase my chances of seeing something, because finding a B-21 is honestly going to be like finding a needle in a haystack. There's only 2 pre-production prototypes in existence, and I don't even know if they're going to be flying them today. I basically followed the perimeter of Edwards Air Force Base up the fence line, and I turned onto this little hill that gives me a nice panoramic view of both the base itself and the airspace. So I'm gonna set up my camera and see if I get anything interesting today. First, let's take a little walk around the campsite here and see what we got. Whole lot of nothing, pretty much. A lot of garbage. Looks like there's an old mine up here, maybe. So yeah, I'm gonna be posting up right on top of that hilltop over there. There's some scrapped aircraft lying around not too far from the fence line. This guy here is an F-100. Huh. And we got a little bit of activity. Looks like there's an F-16 and an F-35 taxiing on the runway. I think they're gonna take off. Now the F-35's taking off here. The sun is like glaring off my my screen here. It's hard to tell if I'm getting it in the shot, but you can see the F-35 taking off. Yeah, super cool. And there it goes. There's the good old B-1B parked over there. So I sat there for a while and watched the typical aircraft do their thing. We had F-16s, F-35s, stuff like that. I really didn't think I was going to see what I wanted to see, and I was okay with that. But suddenly, I had my scanner on and I heard what sounded like somebody say Raider. At first I thought I just misheard a call sign of a plane, but a few minutes later, I managed to actually see what I'd come here to see. The B-21 Raider came in for a landing. Well, that was incredibly cool, in my opinion, to get to see a B-21 Raider with my own eyes. The trip down here was worth it just for that, in my opinion. So as far as the Northrop Tejon facility goes, we are far from finished with it. In fact, I think we're just starting to scratch the surface, really. So as I mentioned before, I kind of got spooked with the potential of consequences for getting into those buildings, but we will make it happen one way or another. So the interesting thing is I actually was able to establish contact with somebody at the company who was listed as the owner. The problem is, after I did that to try and get permission, the property was transferred to another company, and my contact info was given to a representative at this new company, but they never contacted me, and I reached out to them myself after a few weeks, and I never heard back. So I don't know. I don't know if they want to give me permission to film in those buildings or not, but I'm pretty confident that we're going to make this happen one way or another. So pretty soon, I'll be able to show you guys what's inside that big hangar, if anything. If I find any underground entrances or anything like that there, I'll be sure and let you guys know. So stay tuned for that video because it is coming. Anyways, guys, as always, I appreciate you tuning into my channel. I'll see you on the next episode.